Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to join Next 100 Coalition AI Data Centers and Water Impacts webinar. We're going to get going here in a couple of minutes once we start to reach critical mass. Thank you so much for joining us. We really look forward to having Dr. Bren and Krista Romero-Cardenas with us today, as well as you all, to learn more about this important issue.
All right, I think we're ready to get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this really important conversation on AI data centers, big tech, and the true cost of our water resources and the impact to human communities. The Next 100 Coalition is a national network organization. We work to connect and support communities and grassroots organizations in the protections of waterways, lands, ocean, and coast to advance community prosperity and resilience. My name is Chela Garcia Irlando. I'm the Executive Director of the Next 100 Coalition. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Karen Bigelow.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Bigelow. I'm the Director of Programs and Advocacy with the Next 100, and we are so excited to open up this conversation today around AI and data centers. And in our portfolio around AI data centers and conservation, the Next 100 brings grassroots leaders together to share strategies and advance collective action to ensure AI data centers are developed with sensible oversight and policies that protect communities and the environment, while supporting technological advances that benefit the social good. And so, in addition to this webinar, we've been able to host conversations that address gaps in information about data centers and the environmental impacts and energy impact. Part of these recordings are available upon request. So if you have an interest in watching these past videos that we have, please do not hesitate to reach out to us, and we're happy to share the link with people. We're excited to host additional webinars in the future. And next, we're actually planning to address the potential environmental impacts that came out with the White House's release of the AI Action Plan. And so that is something that we'll be having on our agenda in the coming month. And so we will share more details later about that. And so now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jonathan, to get us started today with our conversation about AI and water.
Thanks so much, Karen and Stella. And hi, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. My name is Jonathan Terrell, the States and Regions Program Manager for Next 100 Coalition. I've also been leading the AI data centers and conservation portfolio with Karen. I'm especially excited about the topic of this conversation, the water impacts of data centers. I'm born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico, home of the Middle Rio Grande watershed, where water scarcity is a major concern for everyday residents, outdoor recreationalists, agricultural communities, plants and wildlife, and all of the things that call the river home. Data centers are an important user of water across the country, and today we're going to discuss Next 100's concerns for water, AI, and data centers, and some important information to consider going into our speakers' presentations. We'll hear from Dr. Chalet Wren and Krista Romero-Cardenas to learn more about the water impacts of these data centers and the concern that Southwestern communities like Tucson face. Finally, there will be time for Q&A with our speakers at the end. Before I turn it over to our speakers, I want to give a quick overview of why Next 100 is concerned about water and AI. First, I want to define quickly what AI data centers use water for. There are three different types of water use for AI data centers. Scope 1 uses, which include direct water use on site, primarily to cool the large racks of servers that make up a data center. Scope 2 uses, where water is used offsite, often for energy generation to provide power to data centers. And then Scope 3 uses, which include water uses throughout a data center's supply chain. What's important to note here is that scope 1 is the direct use of water in the facility. Scope 2 and 3 are of indirect use. Want to talk a little bit about the trade-offs with these different types of uses. Some data centers use water-based cooling systems, which have a greater direct water impact, that's scope 1 use. In some cases, data centers can also use cooling systems that are water efficient. However, sometimes these systems are more energy intensive and have a greater indirect water impact with the energy costs. This is especially concerning where energy resources are located nearby or drawn from the same watersheds as the data centers themselves. However, some techniques, such as systems in Northern Europe, deploy energy and water efficient cooling systems, such as free cooling, as well as renewable energy like wind and solar, which is less water intensive. What are we thinking about here in the United States? What are some of the trends that Next 100 is monitoring? Recent studies suggest that 1/5 of data centers are located in water-stressed regions, and 2/3 of new data centers built in 2022 are in high water-stress areas, with 5 states accounting for 72% of new data centers in high-stress areas. Those are Virginia, California, Illinois, Arizona, and Texas that we have represented in our audience and some of our speakers today. While it appears there might be some technical and planning solutions to decrease the direct and indirect water burden of data centers, a key challenge to develop these solutions is the lack of transparency in water use for data center developers and operators. Much public information up to this point has been primarily independent estimates of water use or aggregate estimates of water use from these corporations, often at a regional or national level, rather than individual data centers reporting their water use. And as we know, water use can be an inherently local issue. That's why we're so excited to have our speakers today. Dr. Ren's lab has been independently estimating data center water use, and Krista has been working with communities in Tucson to address this transparency concern. Thank you so much both for your time and work. First, I'll turn it over to Dr. Xiaolei Ren. Dr. Ren is an associate professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of California, Riverside, where he's also a cooperating faculty member in the computer science and engineering department. His research focuses broadly on AI, systems, and society, striving to build a resilient, safe, and healthy future. I'll turn it over to him now.
Thanks, Jonathan, for the great introduction and also laying the background on AI and water. So I'm very happy to share some of the numbers and let me just, okay. So yeah, I'll be presenting some of the numbers about AI and water and also some of the comparisons that you'll be seeing later. So I'll skip the first slide. So we're not trying to be against AI. Instead, we're just trying to provide some quantitative evidence-based assessment of the potential environmental impacts of AI or water to support decision-making processes. So let me start with this. So on August 12th this year, and there was a national declaration of water drought in the UK. And one of the recommendations the UK government gives to the citizens is that please delete your old emails and pictures to save water. So of course, this is just a humorous way to encourage people to save water. But why is that? The reason is, as Jonathan briefly mentioned, data center uses water. They are one of the commonly used cooling system is just using cooling tower. And this type of cooling tower is just constantly evaporating water. So we need constant replenishment from the municipal water systems. And usually the water for data centers is coming from the same public water system that also supplies homes and businesses. And when we talk about water, there are a few important concepts: water consumption, water withdrawal, and water discharge. Water withdrawal is basically the amount of water that we use or coming out of the faucet. And discharge is how much we give back to the public water system. Consumption is the either evaporated or sometime we put it into some bottles. Those are considered as a removal from the original source. So it's considered water consumption. And different data centers have different consumption rates out of their withdrawal, but typically it's 50% or more. Residential water consumption rates in the urban settings is roughly 5 to 15%. And some tech companies consumed more roughly 30 billion liters water, and that's sort of comparable to a beverage company. So whether it's large or not, it's we need to look at the specific context. And also it's projected to be increasing really fast by the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. I will skip these slides. And so how much water was used by data centers? So when I say withdrawal, when I say use, it just means withdrawal. So 35 billion liters 35 billion gallons of water was withdrawn by the US data centers in 2023. This was just an estimate because nobody really knows the exact number. So does it sound a lot? Are they a lot? Well, if you look at the overall total public water supply, it's roughly 0.3%. 0.3% is similar to the total public water supply of a small state like Rhode Island. And it's also less than, by the way, Rhode Island has about 1 million people. And also it's even less than 10 days of the total public water leakage in the US. However, water leakage is really a significant issue. It accounts for 15% or more, in some places even 60% of the public water supply. And even the largest US state like California doesn't have as much. The total public water supply in California is still less than the total water leakage. So these are some of the statistics, and whether 35 billions is considered a lot or not, it just depends on the context. But actually, if you only look at the total number, it might miss some critical information because we really need to look at where and when the data center use water, because water is a regional and temporal resource. So Bloomberg News shows that more than 2/3 of the new data centers built in the US since 2022 are located in regions with high water stress levels. And earlier this year, the New York Times reported that some data centers in the Newton County, Georgia, is requesting water usage more than the county's entire daily usage. And also water efficiency or water usage is not constant. It's typically spikes in the summer. And it could be using zero water in the winter times. And also remember the summer times often correlates with the period of time when people need water most. And so water is also part of the supply chain resilience because the water supply for data center could be cut off due to leaks or due to some other extreme scenarios. So I think even though some certain places data center have plenty of water, we should be thinking about this as a resilience strategy. Okay, now let's focus a little bit more on AI. How much water does AI use? So you've seen different claims and, for example, 2 internal studies from OpenAI and also from a technical report by Google. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, said it uses 1/15 of a teaspoon of water, and Google says it's just 5 jobs. So it sounds like nothing, right? However, if you look at some of the peer review study, like Mistral AI, another major AI company in Europe, they say that using their large 2 models to generate 400 tokens consumed about 45 milliliters water. So it's way higher than this 0.26 or 0.32, right? And on the other hand, our study, which estimates, shows that in 2023, if you use a GPT-3 model with 175 billion parameters to generate 10 to 50 medium length queries, responses, each having about 150 to 300 words, consumed a total of 500 milliliters water, including both onsite and offsite. So typically, the offsite part is more dominant compared to the onsite part. And oftentimes, I have to include a really long statement because this is accurately representing our result. And you often see in the media headlines that they say, ChatGPT used this as much water. Well, that's not really what our study shows. And So all these numbers are correct actually in their own context. But if you put them side by side for a comparison, that's not really meaningful and sometimes misleading. So let me give you an example of side by side comparison made by Google last week. So they published a paper, and their paper says the water use of actually their Gemini apps uses water use of 0.26 milliliters water equals 5 drops of water, and it's orders of magnitude less than previous estimates of 45 to 50 milliliters. So I'm not sure how you interpret this statement, but my understanding is this statement suggests Gemini AI is way more efficient than, and also the previous estimates were way off the reality. That's my understanding. However, is 2.26 milliliters way lower than 45 or 50? Well, this sounds like a silly math question because obviously 0.26 is orders of magnitude less than 50, 45 or 50, right? However, if you dig into the context, and let's see where those numbers come from. 0.26 is coming from Google itself. It's for on-site water only. It's for Gemini apps and medium lens without actual numerical lens. And also it's for their system in May 2025, and it's 33 times higher than May 2024, according to their own statements. So if you look at the other comparison, for example, our study, 50 milliliters. What is 50 milliliters? Where does it come from? This is the highest total water number for 18 different locations that we consider in our study. And in our study, we separately list on-site, off-site, and total. And somehow Google chose our highest and total for their on-site only. And also we specify our model size, GPT-3, 175 billion parameters. And also the length of our output is 105 to 300 words. And our study was in 2023. And also we noted that the water consumption per request may decrease due to the efficiency gains. And this actually corresponds, this aligns with Google's own assessment. But now, if you put these three different numbers, is 2.26 still lower than 45 or 50? I don't get the conclusion. So what is the true water cost of a water footprint of AI? Well, we need to understand, like Jonathan said, we have scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. That's for carbon footprinting. And similarly for water as well. And we have talked about the on-site water, but the off-site water is for generating electricity, and not many companies are reporting that. And off-site water, scope 3 water is for supply chain. And supply chain, we have very little data available for supply chain water, but that's presumably a lot. So what is the true water cost of AI? The answer is we don't know. And we need a standardized reporting framework for fair and transparency and to make informed decision making. That's the end of my slides.
Well, I thank you so much. Really appreciate your comments. Thank you for presenting the numbers and asking us to make some questions about those. Before we go into Q&A, and I'm sure that there'll be a lot of questions about your presentation, I'm really excited to present our next speaker. We're really excited to be joined by Krista Romero Cardenas, MPH, PMP, who's a doctoral student in natural resources at the University of Arizona and a National Science Foundation Cambium Fellow. She is part of the NEPA Access research team, where her work focuses on environmental justice. She holds a Master of Public Health and Health Policy and has professional experience across government, nonprofit, and corporate sectors. Her background spans public health, environmental policy, and workforce development, with expertise in stakeholder engagement, program evaluation, and cross-jurisdictional collaboration. Krista's current work is grounded in a One Health approach, recognizing the deep interconnection between human, animal, and environmental health in advancing community-driven environmental governance. Krista, thank you so much for joining us. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much for the space and the place. Are you seeing sorry about this. Do
All
you
good.
only see presentation or
I saw your presenter's view.
okay. Sorry about this. We did try this. Hmm. Oh no, excuse me. Swap displays.
That looks
Oh,
great. That looked great, Krista.
that did. Let me try that again. Thank you all for your patience. Are we set?
You look
Okay,
great.
thank
Okay.
goodness. All right, excellent. So, thank you for making time. And again, my name is Crista Romero Cárdenas. It was really hard to figure out what to share with everyone. So as I get started, I would like you guys to use the chat. And Jonathan, please let me know. Just tell me what field you're in, kind of if you work in health, if you work in tech, like just give me an idea who we're working with, because I'm gonna go through a quick little exercise. So Jonathan, as I go through, let's give it a minute and we'll go, okay? So starting with not one drop for data. So what's very interesting about this, and again, thank you for putting in information in the chat, is a lot of times we say like, how does this affect me, right? I might work in business. What is my role? I might work in health. What is my role here? And so I want to do just a quick 1 minute activity with everyone to have you kind of think and also open that perspective, which is what I try to communicate when I'm speaking everything with academics to legislators to lobbyists to any type of industrial or corporation I'm working and trying to communicate with. So first impact that you see when something happens, when you're trying to get some land, whatever habitat existed there is no longer there. Okay, so in this case study, we're going to go in and I'm going to show you some maps, but whatever existed there is no longer there. And also in Arizona, it is the Wild Wild West still. And so it is very easy to target these states where water is not as protected and where you can do anywhere from land leases or purchasing land. And in our case in Tucson, Arizona, that's exactly what happened. And so with that being said, you have indirect impacts later, right? So if you have more capital and you could dig a deeper well, you might not see it in the first 10 years or 15 years, but you will start affecting the water table. Your neighbors, maybe we have a lot of agriculture in Arizona, you might start drying out their wells as well. What happens to the animals? They start moving and migrating away from their original habitat. And in human health, it's really important to also think about what happens once we start depleting the water. We just had a massive haboob that totally destroyed and shut down the utilities, and that was just 2 days ago. So you also think about arid lands and the ecosystems that are there and the way that dust impacts not just human health, but we have a huge retiree community, and that eventually also affects your hospitals, your emergency management services. And so just as we're going through this, kind of piece those together, because whatever arena you're in, it's really important for you to understand how to speak to those things. Okay? So let's get started. How did this start? So it actually, from when we first heard about it, is February 24th. And usually these projects go in very quickly, right? So there was an NDA imposed, so we couldn't really understand who it was, what was going on, and there was a lot of unanswered questions. What they did promise is a whole lot of a great, beautiful marketing picture is what we saw. So we saw that the project was talking about $1 billion investment in Arizona, in Tucson, Arizona, Southern Arizona. Very different from Phoenix because Phoenix already has data centers. Tucson, not so much, not really. So this would have been a huge, huge economic investment, and they were really pushing that narrative. Similar to what my colleague Dr. Wren mentioned, is that like there's a lot of non-disclosed information in the beginning, and we'll also get into that a little bit more. Also, there was a big push on jobs and the creation of jobs. So what happened? This move, notice that that came out in February, but everything started moving between May and June. And so Board of Supervisors, just like a little bit of civics education in how our government works here. So you have your local government. For us, that's our city council. Then moving one up, you have a Board of Supervisors. that's what it's called for us, Pima County Board of Supervisors. Then from there, you have your state legislature and then your national level, okay? So the way things started here is they initially had to go through the county. Why? Because the county actually owned the land. And so if they wanted to purchase that land, they first had to get approval from the county. They also had to change the zoning laws to allow for different data centers and different uses. And there was also a land purchase agreement. So remember I mentioned that a lot of these shell organizations or big tech organizations, what they do is they try to lease land or purchase land. Because once you own it, you could do a lot of whatever you want within compliance of what your agreement is. And again, they're really pushing this economic benefit to the community. And so we thought, okay, this is moving really quick, but why does this matter? And so we noticed, as I mentioned, the county owned the land, but the city had to approve it. And also they needed to use city water in order to get this project going. Okay, so that's really important. And then you will see, so thank you to the entire community, the Tucson community that's on this Zoom call. Thank you for everything you've done. You will see a lot of pictures and information. So I'll also be kind of painting a picture of what the movement looked like as we go through this presentation. So something really important and also interesting that you mentioned, Dr. Wren, with the side-by-side comparison on water estimate. Something that was really incredible is that we did have some resources and support from our academic institutions. So we did say, hey, we need help. We need to understand the hydrology, how this is actually going to impact our water tables. And I'm not a hydrologist, but I know some. And so I was like, okay, what are we doing? How do we find out what's really happening? And so there was a huge, it was very misleading where they said that they're gonna do net positive water. What does that mean? That means that whatever water they take out, they're going to replace. How would you do that in the desert? Right? There is such a thing as co-location and there's lots of strategies, but also what's really interesting, and we'll get into it later, is how water rights are actually moving, right? There's everything from water, which is physical water, and there's also paper water, okay? So this is just something that Dr. Bogan put together, and I don't have enough time to take you through the whole novela, like storyline of what happened, but this professor actually provided updated results whenever information would come out, and it was actually combating what was being mentioned by the Beal Corporation and also our city manager. So there was a bit of contention between our governance system and the science of what's actually backing it up because the numbers were not adding up. And we could always go back to these, but I'm going to keep going, okay? So again, the numbers didn't add up. And if you can remember, they first voted this in, like Board of Supervisors voted it June 16th. This is June 14th was the first time we got any information on how much water is going to be used. And what's interesting about this specific project Blue is that during the first 2 years of building, they actually were going to have to use reclaimed water. So they're going to have to use our water while they build a big tube. Like, it was a really intricate project, but with a lot of question marks. And so with that being said, it was not clear how they were going to do the water positivity rates. And again, creating paper water rights is it's very easy when you're a large corporation with a lot of money because you might say, hey, I'm going to take a lot more water. We'll say we'll give it back to you. And if you can't, you're like, oh, it's okay, we'll just pay the fee, right? And Tucson was really worried about that. And so again, there's a really good quote from Dr. Bogan is like, okay, so this data center is going to be completely extractive user of our local water source, right? And so it seems that they're more likely going to just offset the fees by paying for it. And so this is not only specific to us, but I do see this as a strategy. And so think about that as this happens with you. So advocacy starts with you. Here we go into the pictures. When I first heard about Board of Supervisors passing this, I was really concerned because I don't think we were asking enough questions. So for me, I was thinking, okay, what are the expectations? What's the timeline, etc. And I want to tell you that it starts with you. So when I heard about it, I grouped with one of our organizations here that you all probably know because we have really built out the coalition. It's Node Data Center in the Desert. And so I did lead a a postcard event. We were talking about the background on the project, how it's going to move through your governance systems, calling your legislator or your representative. I was leaving voicemails so people could listen to how we are doing it. Because one thing you don't want to do is say, you know, you're terrible, don't do this, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, they really need to know the story. Where are you coming from? And that's why I'm asking for what do you work in? Like, because I want you to connect to what's important to you to be able to relay that, because the stories are what move people. We also talked about, I brought information on a map on like who your council member is. So again, bringing in the education, but also we have a really smart community, and I'm sure everyone does. And if you just provide the tools and the resources, it makes it that much easier to bridge those advocacy efforts. So this was awesome. We actually had more than 300 postcards made. And something else we did that's a strategy that I recommend to you guys is taking pictures. Take pictures of that, because then you could, if they don't answer, you could send in a message and say, hey, I sent in this postcard, just want to make sure that you received it, and try to keep that engagement going with your council members. It's really important to make them know that you're aware and you're not going away and why it's important. Okay. So then from there, everything moved very quickly. So advocacy and the coalition building. So after we did the postcard event, the next day there was a group, I wasn't able to go, but there was another group that went and did a site visit to the actual location, which was incredible. So we walked around the perimeter. There was evaluation on the current habitat, what kind of native plants are there. And someone brought a drone, which was very strategic. I highly recommend doing that as well, because while you're there, take advantage of the space, take advantage of that moment, right? And that way you can then come back, and we did an aerial view. We overlaid it with different type of mapping, and it was very successful. So go be there. And then we continue to pressure, because once we started talking community and we said, hey, help us, we then started growing. We also created like a Google sheet where people, if they were interested in helping, they could sign up. But it was very important that when you do these things, try to be as clear as possible. So you want to match people with their skill. So in this form, it also says like, what do you work in? What are you interested in? What is your skill set? And then depending on your availability and what you can do, you get matched up to a committee group to then continue the work. This is not something one person can do. The reason I'm here with you today is because I started speaking at Cafe Passe, and that is where I met my community. I got a card for our local print shop, Glue Factory. Shout out to them. They did a lot of free prints for us to start with messaging. I also got in contact with other people that wanted to work, and just starting to speak at neighborhood coalition meetings and getting people going. So between June and July, there was a lot of things going on. So as you'll see down here, we actually did put enough pressure that City Council opened this topic for a public meeting. They did it at a high school way on the east side, closer to like where the location is. I had to drive like 45 minutes to get there, and it was already full. So that means the community was aware, and they were present, and they were ready. Also on our end, we are also trying to organize. So we were told to wear red. So that's why I'm wearing red today. Is to be like, okay, this is Project Blue. It's also used a lot in legislative advocacy, that if you're against something, or if you want to show that you guys are all united. Let's say there's a lot of people are driving in from a rural area and they're just sitting in the audience. It's hard to tell who those people are, but if you have some sort of messaging or color, then it's a lot easier to be like, oh, they're here for this. Okay. And so you can actually, it shows the scale and the number. But at this first public hearing that was at full capacity, it was very loud. They did allow for questions. And a lot of the presentation done by the data center and Beal, which is like the shell company. They've only existed for like 2 years. It was not descriptive. It was just skipping over the big things. And so our community members were asking questions. Because it was full, they chose to also have a second public hearing, except it wasn't super public because it was virtual. And so, as the No Desert Data Center, we actually did a hosting watch party, and we partnered with a local church. And so, again, that's another strategy for you guys. If you're starting to go through this, like use your community spaces to come together. We had food, we had everything from families to retirees to students. It was just a really, really good space to be together and have to watch what's being sold to us. And some of us were on the chat, sending in questions. So now I'm going to go into what I recommend you do and what worked for us. So one, find your supporters, find those that are against, and find those that are on the fence. Why do I say that? I constantly tell people, I was like, someone that might be your enemy on a certain topic might be an ally in another. So do not disenfranchise someone that might not be agreeing with you at first. There's a lot of room there, okay? And so also keep a unified message, okay? So for us, it was very simple. We're a desert, we're in arid lands, we do not have very much water. This is not the location, space, or place. We do not want this here. Very clear messaging. And it was hard to keep everyone on message, but it's very important because these things are wicked problems. They stem into other things, but just keep it tight. Something else that was really cool to see was one of our council members, Nikki Lee. At first, we actually thought she was for the project, and we did a ton of pressure checking in. And we actually, from all this pressure, we got a lot of the council members to say where their stance is or not. And so something she did, and I don't expect you to read it, I'm just showing it. It's a picture of a screenshot. But she said, send me your questions. I'm going to get them answered. And so she had, if you look at the bottom side of the spreadsheet, it just shows category, what the question was, answer status, and then the link to the answer and the answer. And so this was something that was fleshed out with community input, and she really pushed to get these answers for us. So that was really huge in making sure we can get through to the actual data center and get some answers. From there, just a few pictures of the type of organization that we were doing. We did do everything from sign making. We partnered with a lot of our local breweries, coffee shops, our print shops, and we also, as we got a lot of news press coverage, which was really, really good. I would say a huge shout out to like AZ Luminaria, and also there was a lot of people sending in comments and information. Push the press, push them, invite them, show them what's happening. Because at first, if it's just a little bit, they might not do it. But we were loud enough that they had to listen. They had to highlight what we were talking about. And that took a lot of organization, a lot of showing up and speaking out. We also we're very lucky to see that we partnered with our local watershed management group. So they actually held virtual events and trainings for community members so they could come understand the water table. How is it that our water works here in Southern Arizona? And that was huge. So I put in here, communicate with your community. Grassroots are super important, your nonprofits. Also, remember, they're elected officials, so they should be representing what you say. I know that in other states, I'm keeping a radar out, and it seems that they're siding with the corporations, utilities, water. It is our responsibility to show up and be loud. Also, it's really important to make sure you're partnering with your academic institutions to ask for fact checking on what's happening and what they're giving. It always helps to just, I tell people, look, trust but verify, So just to kind of close this up, because I want to leave some time for questions, and I know this is a very quick overview. We actually did get city council to vote against this. We had to remember initially they had to annex the land, but they still had to get approval from the city in order to move forward. They voted no, unanimously no, which was incredible. And so we were very happy. We had incredible speakers, and it just felt like we were able to win. We got it. They listened to us. And that lasted about a week, maybe, because right now, unfortunately, we are seeing that our utilities is signing like with the state commissioners, and they're trying to move forward on an agreement, even though we voted no. So it has not ended. So one thing I would recommend to you guys is moving forward when you start seeing these projects, like I did also create a few infographics, and I also partnered with like our Southwest Environmental Science Center at the university to do community fact sheets. And this is just a piece of what I did based on a previous webinar actually from here. And also just reminding that a lot of states are going through this. They're out there fishing, seeing what the best deal is. And so since this is really new, we're still trying to develop what that strategy and what that will look like, right? Right now, there's just a lot of money going towards it and it's moving really fast. So we need to slow it down. And like Dr. Wren mentioned, we're not saying no, it's just like how. We need to balance. What's the impact? And so from here, just like ask for the project transparency. You will want ratepayer protections. All these different things should be done at your state level because what we're seeing in Tucson is it's like whack-a-mole. We're able to put this down and it's now popping up in our other rural areas. And they're also starting to target our tribal nations because they have their own water rights. So it's moving really quickly. And just to kind of finish up, like I said, we're not done. We will keep going. Stay tuned and thank you guys so much for your time and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. Krista and Sally, thank you both so much. Really appreciate your presentations. I'm really excited to give our audience an opportunity to dig in. We've already gotten some questions in the chat. Sally, thank you for starting to answer those. But yeah, let's get into it. I want to quickly keep the mic. Karen, Kella, any questions off the bat for our two speakers?
No direct questions. I want to answer one of the first question actually that was posed. Why are data centers increasingly placed in water scarce areas? Is it cheap energy, cheap land, something else? And Dr. Wren actually answered one piece. I want to add that state tax incentives are actually another piece of the puzzle. To Krista's point, there's some whack-a-mole happening at the municipal level, but that just means that a lot of these big tech companies can actually lobby states to provide tax incentives, which are then in places like Arizona, actively recruiting data centers at the state level. And so there's this kind of tension between municipal and state where the state wants to get tax revenue from big tech and data centers, but then municipal communities, local communities are fighting that and saying not here, right? And so there's that tension. So I just wanted to add that level of nuance to the question posed around why some places that are specifically water scarce are seeing an increase in data center development.
Well, appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and go into Q&A. Please don't be shy. If we're not able to answer your questions now, we'll record them and it will be important notes for us in planning future webinars and preparing materials to answer some of these questions as Next 100, as well in coordination with Chalet and Krista. I'm going to go ahead and get it started to give us a sense of time for the final 15 minutes of the webinar. We'll take about 10 minutes to do Q&A, so please get your questions in now. And then we'll take a final 5 minutes just to do a quick closing for Next 100 before we close at the top of the hour. Thanks so much for folks who have started adding questions in the chat. I'm going to start with Bethany's question. Are each of these companies also advocating for their method to be used as a standard, or are there any state/outside advocates proposing a specific federal or state level standard of measurement for water usage and consumption? Kelly, I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Krista as well.
So in the tech industry, there's not a standard, but if you look at beverage or agriculture sectors, they have a fairly comprehensive reporting standard. So for example, you hear, eating a burger consume this huge amount of water, and that water is really life cycle, starting from growing the crops to feed the cattle to make the patty. So it's I think that's fairly standardized. But if in terms of the tech industry, we've seen most companies are just focusing on their direct water consumption, and a few companies are starting to report their indirect water consumption. And some companies are also studying their life cycle overall cooperative water footprint. So we're seeing different directions, and appears that the direct part is is taking the lead at this point, because if you look at the number of companies who are reporting direct versus indirect, and at the federal or policy level, I think the European standard, there's a European country, there's a EU-wide directive that asks data center to report their water usage. In the US, there's no such federal laws. At different states, there is a bill which is still pending in California this year. We also see some other bill either ongoing or have been terminated in other states. So it's progressing, I think.
Mhm. Can I add to that?
Mhm.
So something also in regards to the federal or state standard, something we noticed at least at the local level is that we do not have existing high water users. And so we have never even thought about having this tiered approach. And so that's what we're starting to see now is at the local level is they're like, oh, okay, well, we've never had someone use like 500 million gallons. So what is this going to look like? And so we're not, and policy moves slow, right? And so this private industry is moving a lot faster. I would also like to paint a different picture, adding onto what Dr. Wren said, is like NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, is supposed to be the federal policy that stops and makes you do, it's called a look before you leap law. So you're supposed to do like an environmental assessment, or if it's a big project, an environmental impact statement, where you're looking at like, what is the purpose? What are the impacts? What are the alternatives? How do we make this better? And this current administration is actually dismantling the Council on Environmental Quality. So NEPA is not really existing anymore. So we are now seeing like full steam ahead where we used to have national protections, federal protections, they don't exist. And a lot of states do not have, they're called mini NEPAs, which is like a state NEPA. California does, Arizona does not. So there is no required process to say, okay, what is this actually going to look like? And also just as a reminder for us in the Southwest, they were recently renegotiating the Colorado River water distribution because we have less water. So there's less going down, right? And so there's all these different components that are coming together that we really need to think about before we say yes to this, because we need to balance it. And not even talking about maybe not having FEMA, right? What happens if there's an emergency? Who's going to help us? So we need to start thinking big like that. Thank you.
Thank you both. Next question, I'm going to go to Lance's question. Blue is proposed within city limits in Tucson. Now they've made a move elsewhere in the county with the backing of the Arizona Corporation Commission. How would it be best to organize outside of one's city but within their county? What are tribes' role in organizing? Tucson specifically doesn't have a good relationship with its local tribes. It seems like their status as sovereign nations can prove to be an Achilles heel, such as in the case of Alligator Alcatraz in Florida. Curious to hear anyone's thoughts. Karen, Ella, please feel free to come on and answer there as well.
I can get us started. So that's a really good question. And like we mentioned before, since there aren't any policies or protections right now, not only at the local level, but at the state level, they're going to keep bouncing. And from what I've seen is it's business as usual, right? So you try to see where you could get the best deal. And that's what they're doing. In regards to the tribal nations, I did have the opportunity to go speak at their Fish and Wildlife Society conference in Colorado and start talking about this. And so just to kind of plant the seed with the council members, and also in tribal nations like Navajo Nation, they have chapters and multiple chapters. Here in Tucson, we have the Tohono O'odham. And so they do have their own water rights, and I do see that they're starting to target them, and it's very money can, buy people out. And so right now it's really important to have these conversations. And the strategy is just educate, because you can't tell them what to do, but share what's happening and join forces. Thanks.
I'm going to keep this moving. A question for Dr. Wren. What are the gold standard ordinances / regulations around data center water use that you point to? Either real life examples or model standards. One challenge that we've seen, even in some of the best case scenarios, is policymakers replicating existing ordinances from other jurisdictions, even when those ordinances have critical gaps.
I think one of the critical challenges we don't really have. There's no standardized reporting framework. So we are seeing very different numbers. And some companies just put those numbers together to give a misleading comparison. And I think those type of comparison could be even harming and undermining the credibility of the different studies. So it's we need to, because if you don't have a standard, then I mean, all those numbers can be correct, but how do you compare them? So from my point of view, when we report the water, I think we should report similar to the carbon reporting. We should have different scopes, different boundaries, and then report the numbers separately. And of course, we can also include the total as a reference. But those detailed information across different usage scenarios, different boundaries are very important. And without those information, it's just we're comparing apples to oranges, and that cannot help us make an informed decision.
Thank you. That's super helpful. We're starting to wrap up. Thanks so much. Oh, yeah, Chell, go for it.
Yeah, I want to follow up on the previous question as well, around county board of supervisors, county commissioners. They are often elected positions, and so there's often very little challenges that happen in those positions. So just encourage you to educate yourself on those possibilities at the county level. And then also want to note that there are also water positions that leverage a lot of power in the regulatory space at the state level, at the municipal level, and at the county level. They're often appointed positions by mayors, board of supervisors, or state legislatures or governors. And so I'm going to make a plug for Next 100 here. Actually, we have our Environmental Regulatory Institute where we provide education for leaders interested in serving and doing strategy and advocacy around regulatory processes and commissions. So I just, because that was a question in the chat, want to make that plug. And then lastly, there was another question about the right to work states. We don't have a specific overlay in the earlier chat messages from Karen Edelstein. There is a map that shows existing, prospective, and new and proposed data centers. I would recommend looking at that map. It's very informative. And then based on just my high level overview of and knowledge of right to work states, there's a lot of synergy between the proposed data centers in specific states and right to work states. So I do think that there is a lot of overlap there as well. And for those who don't know, right to work states are essentially states that make it very difficult or prohibit collective bargaining and unionizing. So we'll end the Q&A there and pass it back to Jonathan.
Thank you, Tella. And thank you again to Krista and Chalet. Really appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you to participants. Really great audience today, and appreciate your questions and time. There's a couple of things that we'd like to announce in wrap up of this webinar. One is a sign up. Next 100 is starting a listserv to join the conversation that we're holding around AI data centers and conservation, talking about issues such as water, as well as other conservation and environmental justice impacts that AI data centers have in local communities. I also want to invite folks who are on this call. We're really excited to announce a new initiative within this portfolio. Our teach-ins specifically to educate, really to the, I think, point that both Krista and Chalet really hammered home today, to educate and help folks understand the different trade-offs and ways to interpret a very complex issue, ultimately from a community-driven lens. To close us out, I'm going to launch a quick exit poll, just a couple of questions. One, to see if there's interest or if you'd like to be added to this listserv to stay up to date. Please let us know there. You've got your emails from the Zoom registration, so we'll follow up with you there if you would like to be added. And then secondly, we're thinking about, as Karen mentioned at the top of the call, more webinars that we can host to help resource communities that are trying to understand and anticipate the incoming data centers in their communities. We're trying to understand what is kind of the next thing to do. We're definitely holding a webinar to cover more of the potential impacts of the White House's policy to drive and push data centers in local communities. But we're curious to hear more from you all about what would be helpful to continue holding these webinars for. So please feel free to write the questions as we have them there. And then finally, I'll turn it, as we're reaching our last 2 minutes, I'll turn it over to Karen to close this out.
Thank you, everyone, for having us. Thank you so much to our guest speakers. This has been such an informative, and I cannot wait for us to engage people more on this topic. We are so grateful for you all. Please, if you haven't, fill out the poll so that we can know how to continue to resource you. But thank you so much for having us for this last hour, and we will follow up with you, hopefully with slides that we have, as well as other resources. And please be on the lookout for our upcoming webinar that we will do around the Presidential AI Action Plan, as we discuss specifically how it impacts the environment, especially in our issues around water, energy, and land usage. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a good day. Bye.
Thanks so much.